My sister laughed at me during the interview, called me a joke. I stayed silent. She had no idea the person deciding if I get hired. Sleeps beside me every night. The moment I stepped into that glass-walled conference room, I felt it like I had walked straight into a memory I never wanted to revisit. There she was, sitting at the head of the table, my half-sister Stacy. Her perfectly manicured fingers wrapped around a branded coffee cup, her eyes scanning my resume like it was an inside joke. And when she looked up and saw me, the smirk. That smug teenage smirk she'd worn our whole lives. I hadn't seen her in over a decade, but nothing had changed. "Well, look who finally decided to grow up," she said, loud enough for the two other interviewers to hear. This'll be fun. I wanted the floor to swallow me. The air felt thick, like everyone in the room had just realized they were witnessing something far more personal than a standard job interview. Stacy didn't waste time. She brought up my failed catering business, my brief stint working retail, even the night I had to crash on our aunt's couch when my marriage fell apart. She called it context, as if humiliating me was relevant to assessing my qualifications. I didn't say a word. I didn't defend myself. I let her play her game, take her little victory lap. What she didn't know was that this company, her pride, her domain wasn't hers to run unchecked. The CEO, the man whose signature seals every hiring decision, is my husband. We built this life quietly, choosing not to publicize our relationship at the office. But he's not just my partner. He's someone who's lived through betrayal, who knows exactly what cruelty looks like in a boardroom. And as I sat there, letting her dig her own grave with every cutting remark, I kept one thing in mind: revenge. Isn't always loud. Sometimes it walks into the room wearing heels, carrying a resume, and waits. Growing up, Stacy was always the one people noticed first. Blonde, loud, with that high-pitched laugh that could stop conversations in its tracks. She knew how to turn heads, how to charm adults, how to twist any situation in her favor. Me? I was the quiet one. The bookworm. The other daughter. I used to think it was just in my head, the way my father would beam when she walked into a room and barely nod when I did. But over time, I stopped pretending I didn't see it. We shared a roof, but not much else. She was my dad's daughter from his first marriage. I came later, the product of a rebound, as she once called it during an argument. We went to the same schools, but she was a cheerleader and I was in the library. At home, she took the biggest room and left me with the one facing the alley. Every holiday was a performance, her fake smiles, my forced patience. Our parents didn't help. If anything, they widened the gap. I was responsible, sensitive, the one who'd be fine on her own. Stacy needed attention, and she got it dot by the time we were adults. We drifted into silence. No big falling out, just years of little jabs and invisible cuts. I moved out at 23, got married young, and tried to build something of my own. She stayed close to home, climbed the corporate ladder like it was built for her. We stopped sending birthday texts years ago, and yet somehow, even after all that distance, she still knew exactly where to hurt me. When I saw her name on the email confirmation for the interview, something twisted in my gut. Stacy Green, Senior Hiring Manager. Of course, I thought about canceling. I even hovered over the withdraw button for a solid minute. But then I remembered the rent notice on my fridge and the groceries I couldn't afford last week. This job could be the start of something better. I couldn't let her scare me off, and so I showed up. I wore the navy blazer that made me feel like I belonged in rooms like that. I practiced my answers. I reminded myself I was qualified more than qualified, actually. But none of that mattered when I walked in and saw her face. Not because I was unprepared, but because I saw something in her eyes I hadn't expected. Delight. She was genuinely happy to see me vulnerable. That smile wasn't just about me walking in. It was about her being able to shut the door behind me. The last few years hadn't been kind to me. After my divorce, I drifted emotionally, financially, even geographically. I left San Diego with 2 suitcases and a checking account that barely scraped 4 digits. At 47, starting over felt like a punishment. Every job I landed was a patch, not a path. A few months here, 6 months there. I worked as a receptionist in a dentist's office where they forgot my name half the time. I did seasonal inventory at a craft store over Christmas and nearly froze in a warehouse in February. None of it was a career. It was survival. Still, I kept my resume clean. I polished it like armor, carefully crafting bullet points that suggested purpose. Client communications instead of answering phones. Inventory management instead of stacking boxes. It wasn't deceit, it was strategy. No one wants to hire someone who sounds like they're still recovering. When I saw the listing for an office coordinator at Kearns & Wolf, it felt like fate was finally ready to be fair. It was full-time, salaried, with health benefits and a structured path for advancement. I could finally stop counting every dollar at the grocery store or waking up at 3 a.m. with anxiety squeezing my chest. I applied immediately, not knowing my own sister's name was on the other side of that digital portal. The confirmation email came a day later. "We'd love to meet you, Miss Collins. Your interview is scheduled for Thursday at 10 a.m. Number, mention of who'd be present, just a room number, a time, and a signature from the hiring department. I debated whether to mention anything to Matt. He was due back from a conference that week and was buried in board meetings. We'd always kept our personal life out of the office. Most people didn't even know we were married. That was by design. When you're a CEO and your wife's been on the job market for a year, you keep things quiet. But part of me wanted to say something just in case. Something about the email felt off, not threatening exactly. Just a little cold. I didn't tell him, not yet. I needed to see for myself. Thursday morning, I left the apartment early, avoiding Matt's questions. With a quick kiss on his cheek and a "wish me luck." He smiled, but something in his eyes lingered. Maybe he sensed something I didn't, or maybe he just knew me better than I realized. I arrived 10 minutes early, heart racing, palm stamp. I didn't know she'd be there until the door opened, and there she was. And in that instant, my resume didn't matter anymore. Because no amount of bullet points could shield me from a past that was now sitting directly across the table, waiting to tear me apart. The first 5 minutes of the interview felt like slow torture. I sat there, pretending not to feel the icy thrill radiating off Stacy's voice. She greeted me with a faux surprised, Well, look who we have here." Like, we just bumped into each other at the mall, not at a job interview I desperately needed. I smiled, said her name calmly, and kept my eyes on the other 2 people in the room, a young woman in HR and a man from operations, who seemed unsure if this was still a professional setting. Stacy leaned back in her chair like she owned the place. Technically, she didn't, but emotionally, she was playing it like her kingdom. She let the others take the lead at first, nodding along as I answered standard questions about organization skills, calendar management, and software proficiency. I gave polished, honest responses, hitting every mark I'd rehearsed. Then out of nowhere, she cut in. "So tell us, Allison," she said, her tone laced with sugar and arsenic. "How did your catering business go? Still baking cupcakes, or did that, fold?" She chuckled, glancing at the HR rep like they were old friends. They weren't. I checked LinkedIn. I blinked. Just once. It ran for 3 years. I shut it down during the pandemic. "Oh, right, she said. "That was the one with the kitchen fire. Or the one where you lost your truck." The room tensed. I saw the HR rep shift in her seat. The man beside her looked down at his notepad, pretending to take notes. I cleared my throat and answered as evenly as I could. It was a tough time for a lot of small businesses. Stacy smiled wider. "Of course. I just remember Dad saying how hard you tried. So much effort." She dragged out the word like it was a punchline. I knew what she was doing. She was drawing blood in tiny, professional-sounding jabs, none obvious. Enough to get her in trouble, all sharp enough to rattle me. And for a second, it worked. I felt the heat behind my eyes, the sting of old insecurities. But I breathed in and reminded myself, this wasn't high school. I wasn't 17. And I wasn't going to lose it in front of two people who might one day be my coworkers. I've had challenges, I said, voice low but steady. But I'm proud of how I've handled them. The silence that followed stretched just long enough to be uncomfortable. Stacy didn't respond. She tapped her pen on her notepad and gestured for the next question, but I caught that flicker. In her face, the tiniest twitch of her jaw. I'd thrown her off balance. She wasn't expecting me to hold my ground. It should have ended after the questions. Any sane person would have wrapped things up, thanked the candidate, and moved on to the next resume. But Stacy wasn't done. She was just getting started. Once the formal part of the interview finished, the HR rep began her closing remarks, thanking me for my time and promising to follow up within the week. I was about to stand when Stacy interrupted. Actually, she said, leaning forward with her elbows on the table, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask Allison one more thing. She didn't wait for approval. Tell us what makes you think you're ready for this kind of role, after everything. I mean, your background is more, let's say, patchwork. Don't you feel like you're reaching a little? It was bold, not even veiled. I saw the HR woman's eyebrows lift slightly, unsure if this was still part of the process or something she should report. The guy from operations shifted in his chair, clearly uncomfortable. I kept my voice calm. I've worked hard to build resilience and learn from my setbacks. I believe I bring value through experience, real experience, not just titles. Stacy mused. It's just, this company moves fast. We don't have time to handhold. You're almost, 50 now? The number hit like a slap. Not because I was ashamed of it, because of how she said it. Like, it was a flaw. Like, I should apologize for surviving long enough to apply for a job. I'm 48. I replied, locking eyes with her. And I'm proud of every year I've lived. Some of us learn from life. Others just coast on luck. That landed. Her jaw tightened. She looked away, brushing a non-existent crumb from the table. The HR rep cleared her throat and stood, signaling the meeting was over. I thanked them all with as much dignity as I could muster and walked out without looking back. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from rage. When I got outside, I stood in the parking lot for a minute, just breathing. Trying not to cry, trying not to scream. I had walked into that room hoping for a chance. Instead, I walked into a power play orchestrated by someone who still saw me as the weak one by the time I got home. I still hadn't told Matt what happened. I wasn't sure how. But as I stood in the kitchen reheating leftover soup, my phone buzzed with a text from him. How'd it go? And suddenly, I knew exactly what I was going to say. Matt was sitting at the dining table when I walked into the apartment, still in my interview clothes, hair flat from stress and the wind. He looked up from his laptop, his eyes scanning me, like he was checking for bruises. Hey, he said gently. You okay? I set my purse down and nodded, but it felt like lying. Yeah, just tired. He closed the laptop without another word, stood and poured me a glass of water like it was muscle memory. You want to talk about it? I hesitated. We'd always had this quiet rule work stays at work, especially since his name was stitched into the fabric of the company that had just made me feel smaller than I had in years. But this wasn't just work. This was blood. This was personal. She humiliated me, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Matt's eyes narrowed. Who? Stacy. The room fell silent. He knew I had a half-sister. He'd seen one old photo, heard a few vague stories. But I'd never gone deep. I never thought I'd need to. She was in the interview. Not just in it, she led it. And God, Matt, she dragged up everything. My divorce. The catering business. Even my age. She made it a performance. His jaw tightened. Wait, Stacy Green? That's your sister? I nodded. He exhaled through his nose, quiet but visibly furious. I had no idea. HR doesn't give me names for entry-level screenings. That's all supposed to be impartial. Well, it wasn't, I said. She turned it into a spectacle, in front of 2 other people. Matt leaned against the counter, rubbing the back of his neck like he was trying to physically push the anger out. This explains a lot. She's had complaints before, subtle ones. Inappropriate comments, power tripping with interns. Nothing major, nothing provable. But this, you? He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I could see it. Building behind his eyes, a calculation, a cold storm gathering. She can't know about us, I said quickly. Not yet. If she finds out now, she'll spin it. Say I used to. Say this was nepotism. Matt shook his head. I don't care about optics if someone's abusing their position. You should, I said, calmer now. But not yet. Let her feel safe. Let her keep playing her little game. He looked at me surprised. What are you planning? I took a sip of water and met his gaze. I'm planning to let her think I walked away defeated. That's what she wants. But you and I both know sometimes silence is the loudest response. Matt didn't smile, but his expression softened, just a bit. You sure? Very? He nodded, then looked away. All right, let's play it your way. Matt wasn't just my husband. He was also Matthew Wolf, yes, that Wolf co-founder and CEO of Kearns, and Wolf, the man whose vision built the company from a 2-man tech consultancy in a rented office to a mid-sized firm with satellite branches. In 4 states, to the world, he was a leader, a strategist, a quiet storm. To me, he was the man who made tea when I cried over rejection letters. The man who read every version of my resume without ever once asking why I couldn't just use. His name, we met 7 years ago at a community fundraiser. I was managing a booth for a literacy program. He was sponsoring the event. I didn't know who he was. I just knew he was kind. He asked thoughtful questions. He listened like what I had to say actually mattered. It wasn't until our 3rd date that I Googled him and realized why the hostess at the restaurant had looked so stunned. I'd asked him once, years ago, if he was sure he wanted to marry someone who'd been through so much. Someone messy, as I put it. He looked me in the eye and said, I don't trust people who've never been broken. We kept our relationship quiet at work for good reason. Neither of us wanted whispers, favors, or resentments. When we got married 2 years in, we told only a handful of trusted friends. I never applied for positions at Kearns and Wolf until now. Desperation changes rules, and now here we were. That night, Matt pulled out an old file from his private cabinet. It was thick with printouts, complaint records, and vague notations from Stacy's department. Nothing blatant, but enough to make a pattern. She's not untouchable, he said quietly. She's just been protected by ambiguity. I didn't ask what he planned to do. I didn't want to steer him. I wanted this to play out on its own timeline. I wanted Stacy to reveal herself fully before the consequences landed. For the next few days, I went about life like nothing had happened. I cleaned out the fridge, sent thank you emails for the interview, applied to 2 other companies. Stacy didn't reach out, of course. She thought she'd won. One night, I noticed Matt reviewing an updated org chart. His pen hovered over a name. What are you thinking? I asked. I'm thinking people forget the weight names carry, he replied. Yours, mine, hers. And I knew then something had shifted. It was a Wednesday when it happened. I was folding laundry when Matt's calendar pinged with a last-minute change. He didn't say much, just kissed my forehead, grabbed his coat and said, I need to take care of something. The way he said it told me everything I needed to know. It was time. Exactly 2 p.m. Stacy was called into the executive conference room on the 12th floor. It wasn't her usual turf. As senior hiring manager, she lived on the 4th floor with HR and mid-level directors. The 12th floor was marble and silence and closed doors. It was where real decisions were made. She walked in expecting a group. Maybe a quarterly review, maybe an anonymous complaint she could explain away. What she didn't expect was one man at the head of the table alone, waiting. Matt didn't introduce himself. He didn't need to. She froze in the doorway, blinked twice, then said, "I'm sorry. I thought this was a meeting with legal?" He gestured for her to sit. "This won't take long." I wasn't there, of course, but Matt told me what happened later that night as we sat on the balcony under a blanket, wine in hand, silence stretching comfortably between us. He said she tried to regain control, almost immediately smiling, crossing her legs, acting casual. "I hear you've had quite a few interview panels recently," he started. One in particular stood out. Stacy paused, then said, "We see dozens of candidates a month." "I'm not sure." "Don't lie." He said it calmly, not as a threat, just as a fact. He opened the folder in front of him. Inside were printed excerpts of interview feedback, internal memos, emails, all of them pointing to patterns of behavior Stacy thought she'd buried under charm and plausible deniability. And then came the final piece. "Allison Collins," he said, sliding her resume across the table. "She was your stepsister, wasn't she?" Stacy's face changed just enough. Not full panic, just the first signs of cracks. "Was," she said. "We're not close." You still thought it appropriate to use a professional interview to ridicule her. "She's not qualified." Stacy snapped, finally losing the polished tone. "She's unstable. She's been divorced, bankrupt, all over the place." Matt's voice cut through the air. "She's my wife." Silence. He said Stacy's mouth actually opened before. She realized she had no words. No exit, no script. She applied without using my name. She earned her spot in that room. And what you did was not just unprofessional. It was vicious. I asked him what she said next. He just smiled slightly and replied, "Not much." And in that silence, everything shifted. The official email came the next morning. After a formal review of recent conduct, "We regret to inform you that Stacy Green is no longer with Kearns and Wolf." No press release, no big announcement, just a clean internal departure, a name quietly removed from the directory. HR was instructed to refer any inquiries to legal. Matt didn't gloat. He didn't say, "Told you so." That wasn't his style. He just handed me the printed email and asked if I was okay. I wasn't sure at first. It wasn't the rush I expected. It wasn't some movie ending where I'd flip my hair and saunter back into the office in slow motion. It felt quiet, final, like closing a door that I'd creaked open for decades. A few days later, the HR rep from my interview reached out, not about a job offer, but to apologize. She didn't go into detail, but her tone was sincere. She said they were reevaluating the process and would be in touch soon. I thanked her and meant it. I wasn't sure if I even wanted the job anymore. That night, Matt and I sat at the dinner table eating takeout. I asked him, did I overreact? Was I too proud to just walk away? He put down his chopsticks, looked me straight in the eye, and said, "You were too quiet for too long." This wasn't about pride, it was about drawing the line. And he was right. Later that week, I got an email from a nonprofit I'd applied to months earlier. They were hiring again, same coordinator. Role, smaller team, better culture. I said yes. It wasn't about the paycheck anymore. It was about peace. And dignity. As for Stacy, I never heard from her again. Not a call, not an email, not even a petty Facebook message. I sometimes wonder what she tells people, how she spins it, what her version of the story is. But then I remember I don't need to know. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing. And sometimes the best kind of justice is the one no one sees coming until it's already done. If you've made it this far, it means this story touched you in some way. So don't leave without subscribing. It really helps the channel and keeps me motivated to share more stories like this. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And which part of this story moved you the most?